Hello, good day. I'd like to discuss Aristotle's virtue ethics. To discuss Aristotle, I'll be touching on the following points. First, some historical background, and then what do these Greek terms mean? Telos, ergon, and anima. Of course, central to Aristotle's virtue ethics, as you may have read, is virtue, and then how do you become virtuous according to Aristotle. Let us begin the lecture by giving a scenario. Imagine that you are involved in a vehicular accident. You know very well that you are the one who is aggravated. What do you do? Of course, there are many extremes here. Number one is to let your anger get the best of you. No? Maghahamon ka ng suntukan. Or two, magkukulong ka sa sasakyan. But I think anyone who is in this situation would also, it's a possibility, that one who is in this situation will assess the situation. Mainit ba yung ulo nung nakabangga ko? Okay? Is he composed? Is he willing to talk? Pwede ko bang palagpasin to? So, in short, some would really assess what the situation is, what can I do about it, what are my strengths in facing this kind of situation. Galit ba yung nakabangga ko? Because if galit, I should be worried. No, not worried. I should be careful sa mga next steps na gagawin ko. Okay? Now, if you are like that, assessing the situation, whether kaya mo bang harapin, hindi sa naduduwag ka, but you're trying to assess kung kakayanin mo, then baka you are unconsciously practicing what virtue is for Aristotle. So virtue ethics is the ethical framework that is concerned with understanding the good as a matter of developing the virtuous character of a person. As I've said, one of the central questions of ethics is, how do you become good? What is good? And virtue ethics, for Aristotle, you become good if you possess virtuous character. So in short, that is virtue ethics. But of course, we need to discuss ano ba yung pagiging virtuous for Aristotle. So brief history, Aristotle, he lived during that time. He was a student of Plato in the Academia. That's the school, the name of the school of Plato, the Academy. Aristotle gave emphasis on reason as the highest faculty of a person. And therefore, you must hone the capability of reason. Eventually, he had intellectual differences with Plato, and so he founded his own school, the Lyceum. So, nagkaroon sila ng problem ni Plato. Aristotle wrote many things, mapa physical science yan, mapa logic, psychology, biology, ethics, aesthetics. He also wrote things about rhetoric and poetics. What we will discuss in depth is the Nicomachean ethics. So, if you review your basic philosophy, ang isa sa mga pagkakaiba, major difference ni Aristotle at ni Plato is that Aristotle believes that there is only one world. And it is in this world that we should discover reality. Whereas for Plato, there are two worlds, no? The world of the physical things and the world of intellectual things, the world of forms. The physical world is, of course, something experiential, something you see, something you sense, while the world of forms is the perfect world. Okay? That's for Plato. So for Plato, for example, the individual dogs in this world, they are not really dogs, but they are copies of the ideal dog. The ideal dog being elsewhere. So Aristotle says that matter and form, matter yung nakikita, nasisense, nalalasahan, and so forth and so on, cannot be separated from the form. Hindi pwedeng maghiwalay yung matter and form. Reality, for reality to be considered reality, matter and form should be present at the same time. That's the metaphysics of Aristotle. And so the consequence of that with his ethics is that there is no such thing as ideal good elsewhere. Goodness is achievable in this world. It doesn't exist independent of our experience of the world. Okay? For Plato kasi, the good is not to be found in the world. You can only have, experiences of goodness, but the good itself, it is not found in this world. For Aristotle, goodness can be found in this world, and it is achievable. Now, he begins his Nicomachean Ethics by saying that we are purpose-driven creatures. Lagi tayong may purpose sa lahat ng ginagawa natin. As a teacher, as of now, my purpose is to lecture this lesson. As a student, your purpose is at this given time is to finish your modules, to study hard. A flute player, for example, the purpose of a flute player is to play the flute well, so that the flute player achieves his or her purpose. But you see, there is a hierarchy of purpose. And Aristotle believes that there is this ultimate purpose, or telos, that can be shared by everyone. Of course, the telos of a flute player cannot make sense to a person who is not playing the flute. For example, to play the flute well is not my purpose, because first and foremost, I'm not a flute player. For example, the purpose of a father is to protect his wife and his children. But that could not be my purpose right now because I am not married. But Aristotle says there can be a purpose that can be shared by everyone, regardless of your race, your age, or your gender. Now, this ultimate purpose, this ultimate telos, must be something final, self-sufficient, and attainable. Finally, ibig sabihin, ito na yung rurok. Ito na yung pinakadulo. Self-sufficient. Wala nang ibang kailangan pa para ma-achieve mo itong telos na ito. At attainable. Siyempre, purpose yan. So, dapat nakukuha. So, tatlong criteria. So, nabanggit ko na yan kanina, no? The telos of different persons. So, kung may telos ang isang flute player at kung may telos ang isang estudyante, may telos ang isang ama, ano naman kaya ang telos ng tao bilang tao? And Aristotle gives an answer by saying that the telos of a person is eudaimonia or eudaimonia. We can understand the Greek word eudaimonia by saying that it could mean human flourishing. No? Yung mabunga ka bilang tao. At kapag mabunga ka bilang tao, that is a state of contentment, of being happy and healthy and prosperous. But for the purpose of our discussion, let's use the term happiness. So, eudaimonia is happiness. So sabi ni Aristotle, ano ba ang telos na pare-pareho bawat tao? Regardless kung flute player ka o hindi, kung nanay o tatay ka, kung anak ka. Sabi ni Aristotle, the goal or the end of all persons is to be happy. And it is in this happiness that we can find goodness. Ano man nakapagpapasaya sa'yo, syempre ay mabuti. So kung ito ay nakakapagpasaya sa iyo, then that must be something good. So, for Aristotle, eudaimonia is the highest purpose, the highest good. Now, this happiness is not an emotion, because emotion is temporary. This happiness is something final. Kapag na-achieve mo, hindi mo nabibitawan. It is not also a state of nirvana, nor stoicism. Parang bato ka, wala kang pakiramdam. But this happiness, according to Aristotle, is the activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. Ito ay gawain ng kaluluwa na nakaayon sa kabutihan, virtue. And how do you achieve that? By fulfilling a person's ergon, the Greek term for function. So balikan natin, no? Ano ba ang ergon ng flute player? Di tumugtog ng flute ng maayos. Ano ang ergon ng isang teacher? Magturo. But the question is, ano ang function natin bilang tao? So the function is what distinguishes or characterizes the thing from other beings. So for example, the function of an umbrella is to protect us from heat and rain. But what is the function of a person? According to Aristotle, the function of a person is the activity of reason. Ito daw yung kakaiba sa atin. Kung ang mga halaman, ang function nila ay to grow. Ang mga hayop, ang function nila is to fulfill their appetites. Tayo rin naman, no? We need to grow. We need to fulfill our appetite. But for Aristotle, what separates us from the rest is the activity of reason, katwiran. And therefore, Aristotle says that you want to be a person, then you need to fulfill your function, and that is to act in accordance to reason. To be a good person then is to perform his or her rational activity well. Gusto mong maging mabuting tao? Gusto mo sumaya? You need to use your reason well. Gamitin mo ang katwiran mo ng maayos. That is your ergon. To use your reason well in an excellent way. If you use your reason well in a good or excellent way, then you attain arete, the Greek term for virtue. So how do you attain virtue? Fulfill your function well, the activity of reason. And if you have virtue, then you are actually helping yourself to achieve eudaimonia. So here's a direct quote from the Nicomachean Ethics. A happy man needs the external goods as well, for it is impossible or not easy to do noble acts without the proper equipment. So you want to be happy, then you need to have good things. It is these good things, no? Ano bang isang good thing para maging virtuous ka? Di pinalaki ka dapat ng maayos. Kasi kung di ka pinalaki ng maayos, you would not have any foundation, no? Para gumawa ng maayos. Now, you want to become virtuous, it is not accomplished by a single act. Sa Catholic theology, ang virtue is a good action done in repetition. You want to have that virtue of honesty, then you need to be honest all the time. You need to practice honesty so that honesty becomes permanent to you. Then it is a virtue. Ang kabalitaran ng virtue ay vice, bisyo. Kailan ba nagiging bisyo ang bisyo? Yung tumikim ka lang ba ng droga? No, that's not a vice. Pero tumikim ka, pinaulit-ulit mo, tumataas lagi ang konsumo mo ng droga, then it becomes a vice. Something you cannot control. So by virtue, we can also say that you know that you have attained virtue if it's something second nature to you. Na between pagpili sa pagsisinungaling or hindi, pipiliin mo na talaga yung honesty kasi second nature na sa'yo. Virtue na yun para sa'yo. Okay? So ito yung sabi ko kanina, no? May pagkakatulad tayo sa mga halaman at hayop. No? Una, sa mga halaman, no, we need nutrition. Sa mga hayop, we have this desire to eat, to have sex, to fulfill our ego. Now, these are not dictated by reason. Okay? Now, the desire for food, the desire for sexual pleasure, and anything pleasurable, it doesn't arise from the rational faculty. But our desires are subject to reason. Kayang kontrolin ng katwiran. Kaya nga, di ba, pagka yung mga nagda-diet, no? Mind over matter. Mind over matter. Gusto mo, but your reason can tell you, tama na. Okay? Now, the soul of a person, aside from the vegetative and appetitive, ay more yung that thing that separates us is the rational part of our soul. The moral and the intellectual. Tayong mga tao, for Aristotle, we can act. Ang mga hayop, they can only move. No? Notice the difference. Move and act. To act is to freely choose a certain course of action. And our actions can be guided by practical wisdom, philosophic wisdom. These are dictated by reason. It is the rational aspect of the soul or virtue that is where human excellence can be attained. The moral and intellectual virtues. Now, what are intellectual virtues? No? The intellectual virtue is concerned with the act of knowing. The intellectual virtue is sin and wisdom. It is acquired through teaching, through learning. No? Kaya nga siya intellectual eh. No? You train your mind in order to harness these intellectual virtues. Phronesis, sabi natin kanina, is the practical wisdom. And what is practical wisdom? It is the excellence of knowing what to do at a given circumstance. And if you want to have that moral virtue, you need to have phronesis, the excellence of knowing what to do. Moral virtue is our capability to determine the good and doing the right actions. It is acquired through habit. Sabi ko nga kanina, virtue is something good done repeatedly. So you want to be virtuous, you need to practice. You need to form habits. Diba? You want to have that drive to study always. Wala naman siguro tang pinanganak na gusto nang mag-aral lagi, no? Diba? Our study patterns or let's call study habits are there because lagi nating ginagawa. Hindi ka mahihilig sa pagbabasa kung nagbasa ka lang ng isa, dalawang libro at sinabi mo na ang hobby mo ay reading. That's not hobby. It becomes a hobby if lagi mo siyang ginagawa. So you want to form a character, you need to habitually will and do it. So what comprises moral virtue? Is it acting out of the right feelings or passions? For Aristotle, most feelings, passions are neutral. So kung galit ka, that is a feeling, that is a passion. Kailan lang magiging masama yung pagkagalit mo? Pag pumatay ka. Huh? The passions are neutral. But if you're not able to excellently manage your passions, then yan. No? Diyan nagkakaroon ng problema. That is why, for example, how do we know that you have excellently managed your anger? If you are able to determine how to be angry with the right person, with the right time, the right reason, the right manner, and the right circumstance. So sa example natin kanina, kaya sabi ko, kung na-aksidente ka, na-involve ka sa isang aksidente, alam mo namang ikaw yung tama, you have the right of way, hindi ka rin papatol agad ng isuntukan, no? You need to manage your anger. Is it the right time to be angry? Is it the right reason to be angry? Or can I show my anger in a different way? To the point of not inflicting physical injury. Now that right measurement is what Aristotle calls mesotes, or the mean. Sabi ni Aristotle, it is hard work to be virtuous, since in each case it is hard to work to find what is the mean. So also getting angry or giving and spending money is easy and anyone can do it. Madaling magalit. Pero kung tama ba yung paraan ng pagkagalit mo, you should consider doing it to the right person, in the right amount, at the right time, for the right end, and in the right way. Hence, those who can do these things, those who can manage their passions, and therefore, in effect, become virtuous, they are rare, praiseworthy, and fine. So, anger. Kailangan hindi ka masyadong Hindi mo patulan yung anger to the point na papatay ka ng tao. That's an extreme. Anger, hindi rin naman pwedeng ikimkim mo na lang in that situation, yung banggaan. Kasi talo ka, no? May damages. So dapat, sabi ni Aristotle, hanapin mo yung gitna. No? How can you be angry at that point na well-managed yung galit mo? Call the police. Kung may dashcam, get the recording. Act diplomatically as much as possible. Now, of course, no, yes, it is true that we can somehow attain virtue by using our reason. But Aristotle says we need also to have phronimos or moral exemplars. Mga tatay natin, nanay, teacher, who have proven themselves to be virtuous persons. Who is a wise resource? Who is a virtuous person? One who does not even have to control oneself, because one's resolution has been so habituated to always rightly act. Diba? Sabi ko nga sa'yo, ang isang honest na tao, kung totoong na-attain niya na yung virtue ng honesty, hindi na siya nagdadalawang isip, magsisinungaling ba ako at this point or not? A virtuous person does not even have, to think, because it has become second nature to him or her. Now, we need to look up, to listen to those people, to the phronimos, to these moral exemplars. They are the models of who virtuous persons are. So, importante na form yung katwiran mo at mafo-form lang yung katwiran mo to act rightly, morally, if you listen to selected people who for you are effective moral exemplars. Then you can attain virtue. Virtue, let me quote directly from Aristotle from Book 2 of the Nicomachean Ethics. It is a state of character concerned with a choice, lying in a mean, the mean relative to us, this being determined by a rational principle, and by the principle by which the man of practical wisdom would determine it. So the mean, yung gitna, is always relative to us. Pero hindi siya sabi ni Aristotle na yun lang, no? Conforme sa'yo. Yes, conforme nga sa'yo, pero dapat the reason, our reason controls the thought process of determining the mean. And of course, through the guide of moral exemplars, phronimos. So that is virtue, no? The mean between two vices. Okay? So, ito yung mga sum of examples, no, how to determine the mean, no? For example, yung galit, no? Ano ba yung virtue na may kaugnayan sa anger? Pwede nating sabihin ay courage, katapangan. In that situation, kapag tumakbo ka na lang, naduwag ka, that is a vice. Ikaw rin mapapahamak. Baka palabasin ng nakabangga sa'yo, ikaw kasalanan mo pa. But courage also does not mean rashness. Padalos-dalos. Okay? So, yan, no? Yan yung mga ibang nabanggit, no, sa Nicomachean Ethics. So, moral virtue is the mean, mesotes. The exactness of mesotes, or as the maximum act, is relative to us. Sabi nga ni Aristotle. But, there are actions which are wrong and therefore do not have mesotes. No? Murder. Walang excess at walang deficiency yan. Maling pumatay. Mali ring mga liwa. Mambabae, manlalaki, mali. Okay? So that is for Aristotle. Okay?